I never thought I'd spend a summer budgeting for a moat, but here we are, and honestly, I've never slept better. Let me start by saying this. I bought land to get away from drama, not to star in a suburban soap opera where the villain has a clipboard and too much confidence. 2 weeks after I put up a plain little gate, someone decided my private road was a public shortcut. And by someone, I mean the kind of neighbor who believes rules or suggestions and other people's property is a communal convenience. That right there is how a quiet life turned into a full-blown bumper-to-bumper feud. It began simple enough. I'd closed on a small ranchette, nothing fancy, just a couple acres, a patch of pasture, a rundown shed, and a private lane that popped out onto the main road. I put up a gate because I have animals, because I value my privacy, because I like to know who's driving through my yard. The sign said private property in plain letters, polite, not aggressive. The lock was the cheap kind you'd buy at the hardware store, the kind my granddad would scoff at, but I figured would deter anyone with a conscience. First morning, I noticed tire tracks crossing the grass where the gate met the road. Big, fresh tracks. Later that day, while I was mending fence with my hands smelling like wire and sweat, a car barreled through like full. Send my gate swinging wildly behind it, my lock dangling the driver, not even bothering to glance back. She shot out onto the highway like she owned the place. I flagged her down at the exit, which admittedly made me feel a bit like a traffic cop in a bad rom-com. She didn't slow, she didn't apologize. She rolled down the window long enough to deliver a one-line dismissal. The HOA said, "We could use this road." Then she sped off like she'd done me a favor. I called the HOA president, because what else do you do when someone announces your property belongs to them? Her name was Karen, and if you're picturing she who complains about barks at park regulations, you're not far off. Karen was instantly hostile. We were promised access. She said all clipped and sanctimonious. I pulled my deed out, dusted it off like it was a relic, and showed her the lines. No easement, no right-of-way, just my road, my land. My lawyer later confirmed it. I'm not a lawyer by trade, but the paper read pretty plainly, "This is mine." That should have been the end. It wasn't. The next morning, the lock was cut clean off the chain, lying like a ribbon in the dirt. Then it happened again. And again. I replaced the lock and someone brought bolt cutters good enough to shear a small tree. The week after my reinforced lock vanished and the gate lay in splinters, the hinges ripped as if an annoyed rhinoceros had made a point. I felt my blood pressure climb with every new track in front of my house. I'm not proud of the fourth thing I did, but sometimes people force your hand. I put up a trail camera, one of those motion-activated things that flashes like a paparazzi camera when anything moves. I did it mostly to catch a nuisance, and partly because I wanted a record. The footage that came through made my jaw drop. There she was, Karen, in her shiny SUV, step out like she owned a place. She didn't, bolt cutters in hand, snipping at the lock like she was cutting birthday ribbon. The next clip showed her backing the SUV into the gate, full throttle, the metal screeching, the camera picking up the sound of my heart in the background, or so it felt. I called the sheriff and played the videos. The deputy who came out was professional and patient, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself hope. He said the footage was pretty damning. They issued a warning which felt simultaneously satisfying and infuriatingly small. One more time, he told me, and we'll press charges. For a week, peace fell like a soft blanket. I almost forgot the nights spent pacing with the dogs. Then a paper war started. Letters arrived with official-looking letterheads and language designed to make your intestines twist. Prescriptive easement, adverse possession, the sort of jargon that sounds ominous if you don't have an appetite for legalese. The HOA lawyer wrote like a shark, circling, insinuating they had rights because the road had been used openly by residents. My lawyer, who I swear is half bulldog, half Jeopardy champion, read the letters, chuckled, and wrote back a letter that was short and deadly. No easement. Cease and desist. And if anything else happens, we will sue. The HOA lawyer's next letter looked like it had been printed in a hurry. You'd think the combination of a filmed confession, a sheriff's warning, and a lawyer's rebuke would be enough. Apparently, you'd be overestimating the persuasive power of evidence in the face of entitlement. The final straw, the moment I stopped dancing around escalation, was a hot, sticky afternoon when I discovered my goats had pushed through my pasture fence out near the road. One had a nick on its side, and another had sprinted down onto the highway where I nearly pulled off the road to snatch it from under a pickup. I spent half a day herding goats, apologizing to a bewildered UPS driver and realizing that this was no longer about principle, it was about safety. So I went nuclear, or at least I went full rural strategic defense. I planned like a man who'd been forced to learn military-grade patience. I hired a contractor who knew stone and iron the way some people know baseball statistics. We weren't building a monument to paranoia. I refused to become that person. But we were building something that said, do not assume you have rights you do not possess. We put up a 6-foot stone wall lining the road for 20 feet on either side of my entrance, a thick, low-swept structure that looked as if it belonged to the land itself. In the middle of it, we installed a custom industrial-grade sliding steel gate, the kind of gate you see at data centers and small embassies, and wired it to an automatic opener and a keypad. Construction took 2 weeks of dust and mortar and late-night calls to the contractor because the stones didn't sit right, or the gusset plates needed rethinking. Karen drove by 3 times during that span, each time slowing her car to a simmering crawl, glaring like a woman who'd lost a hand in a poker game. The day the gate closed for the first time, silently, smoothly, then solid, I felt something like relief and something like triumph. The gate looked good. It made the property feel finished in a way the flimsy wooden thing never could. The aftermath was almost cinematic. The HOA's lawyer sent one last pompous letter stuffed with threats. My lawyer printed it and used it to line a workshop drawer. I might have told him that for drama, but he actually did. I sent a bill to the HOA for the cost of the destroyed gates, the stolen time, the vet bills for a goat that had to scrape a copy of the video showing Karen cutting the lock, and a polite note informing them that any future trespass would be met with both civil and criminal action. The silence that followed was a curious, perfect thing. What I had not expected and what made the whole thing taste sweeter was the quiet justice of small things. Neighbors from both sides of the subdivision started taking the long way around, rather than hopscotching through my entrance, a kind of social deterrent. Once, while I was fixing a fence post and humming an off-key country song, I watched a cluster of HOA residents pull up, look at the wall, look at the gate, and then look at each other like the joke had been taken away. One of them, a woman I'd never met, got out of her car, walked over and said, "Good work." Finally, some respect for boundaries. She was brief, she was genuine, and she left a jar of homemade jam on my porch the next week, which I still use on my toast when I want to remember the day the balance shifted. There was a more formal form of justice, too. The sheriff's office followed up after I filed everything. The video made a difference in the legal file. Karen was charged with criminal mischief and trespassing, small but public, and public is what counts when someone's reputation is built on moral outrage. The HOA itself got a stern letter from their lawyer recommending they stop harassing me or face damages. The town board nudged them toward mediation. It wasn't a courtroom drama with a gavel and a parade, but it was accountability, and when your antagonist learns the law can bite back, you feel the scales settle. If you're waiting for some rousing, vengeful finale where I dance on the ruins of entitlement, let me temper that image. The thing I learned standing in mortar dust and playing telephone with a lawyer is a quieter lesson. People will test your boundaries until you prove they won't get away with it. There's a moral here that didn't land like a sermon, but like an understatement. You can't ignore kindness matters, but so does firmness. You can be polite and resolute at once. You can protect what's yours without becoming the monster you feared. And here's the part that still makes me laugh sometimes. I'll be out in the yard and I'll see a car slow at the wall, hesitate like it's a maze, and then peel off, embarrassed. There's a satisfaction in watching entitlement learn new routes. My goats are safe. My gate opens for me, my friends, and the occasional delivery driver who's learned to call first. Life resumed its rhythm, sun-up chores, coffee gone cold because priorities exist, but with fewer surprises and a lot more sleep. So here's the real question I want you to chew on, and I mean chew on it like a stubborn piece of steak. When does standing your ground become escalation? And when is escalation the only way to stop someone else from escalating you? Was I reasonable to build a wall, or was I giving in to my own rage? Did the law do the right thing, Or did we have to weaponize proof because community standards failed? I don't pretend to have a tidy answer. Only an experience that taught me to trust boundaries and to make them clear. If you've ever had a neighbor cross a line, literal or metaphorical, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. What did you do? What worked? What backfired? Was justice served? Or did you invent your own? And hey, if you like this tale of a man, a gate, and a stubborn herd of goats, hit like, subscribe, and tell a friend, because the world needs more stories about people who stand up for their little slices of peace.